Welcome to the Business Uplifted podcast. This is episode 1. I'm Mandy Curry.
And I'm Allie Gregg, and we're your host in the podcast. We're thrilled that you're listening to us today. It's so foreign. We're thrilled that you're listening to us, all 5 of you.
So today we are talking about what this podcast is all about, why we decided to even start it, and how it can benefit you. But first, we have to preface a little bit about us, where we come from, and why we're wanting to do this with you today. So we're going to start with Allie first, a little bit of an introduction.
Our backgrounds are completely different. My background is creative. I have both an advertising and marketing agency background as well as experiences in hospitality, travel, and tourism, which is very different than a financial sector or traditional corporate setting. After leaving the university, I went and worked on Capitol Hill, where I did everything from answer phones to get flags that fly over the Capitol for your school and gave tours of the Capitol and Statuary Hall. Came back to get into a true public relations practice and did that for years, and then opened and sold 2 businesses myself. So an entrepreneurial background, finding a way to kind of do what I wanted to do and work with the people that I wanted to work with in a way that wasn't confined. Because the evolution of the advertising business, just in the time that I've been in practice and owned my businesses, has been tremendous, like every other business that we see.
That's really, really good. And so as Allie said, I mean, our journeys were completely different, but we did have an opportunity to work together for a few years. And so our lives merged through this journey. And so that's really why we're here today. And what was interesting is Allie and I met in the corporate world. So she, after this, 20 plus years of this free-spirited world, then she comes to the corporate side. And so I had already spent 20 years in corporate. So Allie and I merged in corporate. I mean, she was just radical to me. And she was, we were in such a conservative environment. And what was so fun about Allie is, and I was ultra conservative too. And Allie comes in and she wears color to work, and she does her hair, and she wears all this jewelry, and it's all coordinated, and and she wears a Swatch watch, and she changes the band all the time. How many Swatch watches, like bands? It's not bands.
It's actual watches. Yeah,
sorry.
More than I'm willing to admit for Pat Gregg to have documentation of.
So it was just so cool, and it was just so non-traditional. I wore black every single day, and my shoes were either black or brown. I never wore jewelry. It was way too flashy. So, it was just a really cool opportunity for us to get together, and it just kind of brought me a little bit out of my traditional world. So I'll tell a little bit about my background too, which is not really as fun as Allie's. I mean, mine was just 20 years of corporate and mostly in corporate management. And I was an absolute geek about it. I mean, from the time that I got out of college through the whole time I was in corporate, I loved it. I drank the Kool-Aid. I mean, people even accuse me. Actually, even in meetings, I would literally make up Kool-Aid and serve it to people. I'm like, drink it, that's your dose of Kool-Aid. Like, it was crazy. I mean, I believed in so much, all the companies that I worked for, I loved it. And we kind of joke, like, speaking about the dress code, like, I hated business casual days. Like, I love that suit feel. I loved wearing it every day. I loved reading leadership books. I started reading them right out of high school, in college. So Allie and I were actually part of the same sorority at different times. But, I was reading leadership books because I was because I was leading the sorority sisters. So I was reading, those books. I mean, at that particular time, it was crazy.
And the bars where I was, they didn't have leadership books there. So that was the difference that we had then as well.
That was the difference. So, when I got into the corporate world, my only goal, I didn't even know what industry I wanted to be in. All I knew is that I wanted to be a manager. It didn't care what industry, where I was at. That was my only goal, was to be a manager. So there it was. So a lot of what we're talking about today was kind of that journey and just what I kind of grew up learning. So that was for about 16 of my 20 years. I spent it as a manager in corporate. And then, so Allie's journey was more kind of that free-spirited entrepreneurial, and then she goes to corporate. So mine was completely different, mostly corporate, and then I started to get that itch and that burn for that entrepreneurship. And so about 5 years ago, I started to get that feeling and then eventually made that leap. And it truly was a leap. It was just a leap, and let's hope to God that your net is there. And you were there when I leapt. And so now I've been on this full-time journey of entrepreneurship. But So one of the wild things that happened though, and it really especially has happened over the last 2 years as we were building our businesses, is that, I found myself applying everything that I had learned over 20 years in corporate. I mean, just naturally, you just apply that to your business. I mean, it becomes all that you know. So I started to apply it to my business. And just I think just in those times of uncertainty, we just kind of revert back to what we know,
Sure. It's what's always worked.
Yes, exactly.
It's the way our parents worked.
Yes.
I mean, our parents, we've had this conversation multiple
Yes.
times, both hard workers. We come
Yeah.
from generations. I mean, my grandmother worked my whole life. Like she was
Yeah.
never a grandmother that came to games. She was a court reporter, a hand stenographer, and worked. And they would
Yes.
take a break for lunch where they went home and had their fresh tomatoes and salt raisin bread, and then they would go back. You all would have been very close. But that's what you know. And it shows your experiences, and I know both mine as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
You start relying on things that you've always been taught because you convince yourselves they're successful for a reason.
Yes.
But then you're also fascinated by the sexy stories of the people who are doing it differently.
Yes, exactly.
Because it's so out of the norm.
It's
so
so true.
unusual.
And so that's really where the last 2 years have been for us. I started to apply all of those corporate lessons that I had learned, and then I realized, oh my gosh, as we were doing that to our businesses became an absolute mess. And so from that point, it was just that, oh gosh, moment, where we had to just step back and say, we've started to kind of just look at our whole, the last just 20 plus years and say, gosh, was that even, I learned it, but was that really right? I'm not really sure that it was. And so it's really about just starting to kind of rethink everything that we've learned in business. And so through this podcast, we are just going to deep dive into those major areas that cause our organizations to be unsettled and really just cause us to be a little bit unsettled ourselves. And so Business Uplifted is about getting to the core and then saying, oh, wow, what in the world were we thinking? And we talk about that even just from our experiences and working together. And then once you get to that core, then you begin to reset. And so often Allie and I use the analogy of an onion because we always are talking about these layers. And so in organizations, I liken layers to programs and initiatives. Okay, so let's just say, for example, our team, we've surveyed our team and we found out, oh no, our team is not engaged. 70% are not really happy where they're at. They don't really enjoy what they're doing.
Right.
So what we continue to do then is we continue to add layer upon layer upon layer. So the team isn't engaged. What are we going to do about it? Okay, well, let's add more team building because I know if we have more of that, it's going to help. Or let's add more training because I'm sure if our employees are more confident, it's going to help. Let's drive career planning because maybe they just don't have a goal or something to work toward. And we just start layering and layering and layering. And then I found myself doing it in my own business too. And it was, okay, now we need to work on employee engagement. Now we need to work on user engagement. Okay, so let's do this and let's do this. And we just keep adding more and more, never really peeling back to get to the core of the problem. And so what we're doing is we're adding more and more burden, more and more things to do. Then it becomes an issue with the team. We're asking them to do more and more, but we don't just stop there. We have to hold everybody accountable. And then we have to make sure there's some sort of tracking to make sure that they're held accountable. And then to make sure it really sticks, let's incent around it. And before we know it, our onion is larger than life, and we don't even know why we're here anymore because we've just got lost in the layers of programs and initiatives. And then, as if that's not enough, that bleed then, that discomfort, that burn that we have within our organizations, it starts to bleed over into our home life. And Allie and I saw this when we were together. Then we get grumpy, and it affects our family. It affects our kids. The work never leaves us. So now today we have a third of the population that is overweight or obese. Nearly 2 in 10 Americans say they take drugs to relax almost every day. And then in our state, it's the most likely to use drugs or medications that alter their mood or to help them to relax.
Well, and 7 out of 10 of adults, working American adults, don't take their vacations. They're basically rejecting vacation. They're not doing it. And it's, we heard Emily Bennington speak about this before. She tells a story about, I think, her youngest son saying to her, Mom, I wish you had time or something. And we've had experiences. My son saying to me, I don't know what happens to you during the day to make you so mean. And it's such a wake-up call, out of the mouths of babes. But the onion, the layers, the burden, all of the weight that you carry figuratively around coming into your home life, and then you don't even give your family the benefit of taking that time off. You're sitting there on your phone and answering emails at 9 o'clock on a Sunday. You're taking calls as you're taking a day off, as you drive to a baseball game.
Yes.
All of those things impact you as a person, because there's a great saying, a meme that goes around Facebook and social media that says most things will work again if you just simply unplug and let them rest. And people aren't doing that. So they are becoming, they're not taking care of themselves because they're tired. I don't want to go walk. I mean, I worked all day. I'm tired. I don't want to do that.
We don't want to cook dinner.
I don't want to cook dinner.
Yeah.
Just go get something out.
Exactly.
I don't want to. I'd like to take vacation, but when you're talking about doing that, there's an acquisition that we're working on. There's this conference call. If I don't make it to the board meeting, then who will present it, and what does that mean for me? And all of those things then create another whole tumor, not even really an onion, that you're then carrying around.
Yes.
And so you are now, there's no escape from it. And you can't see the light. You can't relax.
That's right.
You have no perspective. It's dangerous.
So we're numb. I mean, that's really where we're at. It's so interesting that you say that about your kids too, because I remember there was a time when my oldest, who at the time probably would have been maybe 8 or 9, was showing signs of anxiety. And I mean, at such a young age, I'm like, how stressful can his life be? Well, it wasn't his life that was stressful. He was feeding off of me.
Sure.
And the vibe that I was putting off. And so it was a huge aha moment that, holy cow, I've got to really just change. And so, yeah, to your point then, I mean, what a difference it makes in that bleed is what's really impacting us.
Well, and then finding that, having that perspective to take a step back and look from it. Because again, we go back to what we were talking about earlier. We continue to use the way things had always been done. We're products of the boomer generation. Our parents are products of the greatest generation. They process very differently, and as differently as they parented versus our grandparents, they all had that thing in common where you got up every day, you showed up and you did the job you were supposed to do. You had a commitment to your employer. And, a lot of them, worked for the same employer for a generation. My grandfather was a Greyhound bus driver. Yeah. That was his career. That's what he did his whole life. And that was the commitment. And so we struggle with that too, because no one ever really told us, oh yeah, I totally felt this way.
Yeah,
until we ask them.
Yeah.
Because I know you've asked your mom, I've asked my mom about being a working mother and, the stresses of that. And she was like, oh yeah. I mean, it was just something very normal that you just did. Yeah. Our generation needs to talk about it.
Yeah, that's so good. That's so true. So, where we are at today and the whole reason for this podcast and for what Allie and I do is because, at the end of the day, our souls tell us that there has to be more. I mean, I'm sorry, yeah.
So the eye roll doesn't pick up on the mic.
I know, yeah. and you'll soon realize, Allie and I kind of tend to use different words, and mine are a little bit kind of soul and universe, but we know that there has to be more, and that's what we feel. And then but we don't know what that more is. And so we stand at this crossroads and we're starting to ask ourselves these questions. How much more can I do? I mean, can I wait this out until retirement? Well, shoot, we're really midway through it. I mean, can we wait it out another 20 years until I retire? Or maybe another opportunity will come along, or maybe my company will get bought out. I mean, those are all things I think that we think that, maybe there will be some sort of change down the road. And what our podcast is doing is it's just taking you down the other path to say, okay, this is what it can be. And it starts to ask those really important questions to really just peel back that onion to see what's at the core. To not add another initiative, another project, another, program. Let's not do more stress management programs. That's not it. Let's get to the core of what the real issue is. That's where we start to disrupt, and that's where we start to make a difference. And we believe that happens at any level in any company. So if you are an employee, if you are a manager, a project leader, a small business owner, an entrepreneur, a CEO, whatever it is, we believe this is for you. If you're in corporate America, government, nonprofit, we've represented and worked with all of them. We know the challenges that they face. This is for you. This is for everyone. So the shift in thinking can be applied to any position, really any industry at any level. And so we just hope that through this podcast, before you say, oh, this would never work in my organization, that you really just kind of put on that what if hat and you start to see your organization through a different lens. And so that's what we're going to be sharing. We're going to share our experiences, our stories, and we hope that it inspires you to rethink really why we continue to do things the same way that we are, and really the burn, the bleed that's having then on our companies, on our cultures, and on our lives. And then from that, we began to disrupt. And we often talk about this great quote from Einstein, and it said, "We can't solve today's problems with the same set of thinking that created them." And so that's where really Allie and I kind of come in and with a different perspective. And so much of it is unlearning what we've been taught, and that's not easy. And just as we were talking about, when it reminds me a lot of when you get in that moment, you feel like you have to discipline your child, and you're just in the heat of the moment, and you don't know what to do, and you don't know how to discipline them, and there's got to be a better way. But in the heat of the moment, what do we resort to? The way we were either disciplined or the only way we've seen it. I mean, you just resort to what you know or what you experienced, because that's just how it feels in the heat of the moment. And then after, I'm like, gosh, I know there's got to be a better way, But I mean, so that's what it is. It's really kind of unlearning what we've been taught. That really just sums up, our podcast. And Allie and I are just super excited to be together. We couldn't be more different. I mean, not only are our backgrounds different, but just kind of the way that we look at life, for sure. And one of the things that we talk about, I mean, Allie loves to make like movie references and TV show references, and you'll hear me probably go dark because I'm like,
any
nah.
pop culture vernacular or reference that you might find in a People magazine, Curry has not seen it.
I love it. And then I'll throw out words like soul and the universe, and then Allie will shut down.
Any ethereal reference does do me in.
Oh, it's so funny. But it's super cool though, and we're gonna have a lot of fun. But I love, but one like universe type thing though, and this is why it's so great. We're so excited to be working together. You got to share your story in New York though.
It was both. And this is where my world then becomes Mandy's world, and it qualifies that what's happened to me is valid in the way she thinks. But I was on vacation with my family, last year. We were hiking in Utah, and a woman approached me, and she's a blogger and a wellness consultant, and our children met. And they were both junior rangers. It was very exciting. And our children met, and she said, "What are you doing here?" I said, "I was out here for a conference." And I told her what my industry was, and she said, "Oh, no, that's the wrong business for you. You should help people. Your light is so different." And, when someone says that to you in a parking lot at a national park, you're kind of like, okay, thanks. I didn't know what to say, but my first call was to Mandy, who was the guru for my soul, my self-help expert. So we kind of talked about it, and she said, it's a sign from the universe. You need to figure out what you want to do. So flash forward then, 30 days later, I'm sitting in a hotel in New York. A woman walks by, stops and turns and walks in and says, "Your aura called to me from the street." Your aura called to me from the street, and I just had to come in. Can I give you a reading? And I said, I look around, I'm sitting in a very populated lobby, and I thought, sure. Yes, you can give me a reading. And so she sits down and she starts talking to me, and she said, your aura is just so bright, and I just see someone in your life, someone who is into gardening, someone who's into wellness, and you and this person should work together again. And I don't know why you won't. Well, of course, the whole time she's talking, I'm thinking of Mandy, because that's the person in my life who is all those things. As I drink my Diet Coke, and she drinks her natural homemade avocado smoothie. And so this woman's talking to me, and she keeps going, and she says, "Your job is darkening your spirit. You need to do something else." And so I find myself somewhat emotional after she just kind of flits away and goes on about her day. And I text my husband and I said, "Oh gosh, I can't believe this. Two people in opposite ends of the country telling me essentially the same thing, two strangers feeling this urge to tell me this." And my husband said, "Well, to set the scene, were you wearing the 'I hate my job' signboard and ringing your bell?" And I said, "No, I was not, and I don't hate my job." He's like, "No," he said, "but that's funny." He said, "The universe is telling you something." So it was this idea. So of course I talked to Mandy, and she immediately was obnoxious because she knew she was right.
Oh man, I was
about
so excited.
The soul and the signs.
Oh my gosh. not only was I excited, I think you sent that text to me when you were in New York. It was late at night. Like, and I'm usually I usually go to bed pretty early and I'm up early, but for some reason I was still up. It was like maybe 9:30 or something like that. I didn't sleep like the whole rest of the night. I went down, I journaled about it. I was like, yes, everything I've ever wanted. We're going to get to work together again. It's a sign. It's going to happen. Like, it was the best thing. I mean, I was just so excited. So that's the journey that we're on. And
I need to see those people, though, to make sure my aura is getting clear.
I love
we're
it.
together.
I love it. So that is what we're here for. And we hope that through this podcast that we start to inspire others and to rethink and to really start to create some change. So that is our podcast. We hope that you have enjoyed it. Be sure to subscribe to us on iTunes and also check out our website at businessuplifted.com. We'll be back with another episode real soon.